Wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China from Laos, and I apologize for the lighting and the background noise. I tend to stay well away from COVID-inspired stories. I let the scientists do what they do best. They will tell us what the origins were one day, and when they do, I'll be inclined to believe what China's scientists and what China's government and China's media tell me, rather than what any Western media says about the results. I've learned over the years to trust China's reporting. If they never report on something, it's either because they don't know or because they don't want me to know. But as far as COVID-19 is concerned, China has been quite transparent, despite what we've seen and heard in Western media to the contrary. How do I know they've been transparent? Well, partly because I read State Council Information Office website quite often, partly because I lived through COVID inside of China and I saw with my own eyes what was happening, and partly, perhaps most importantly, because not once have I ever caught Chinese government or Chinese media lying to me. Not yet. Honestly, I really thought the COVID thing was well behind us, but no. The US is still trying to point blame at China and deflect from their own abysmal record, which is why many Western media, particularly US outlets, are currently reporting that the US state of Missouri has had a win against China. Nothing could be further from the truth, but let's look at some details. Truth doesn't really come into it, does it? A federal judge in Missouri found the Chinese government responsible for covering up the start of COVID-19 pandemic and hoarding protective equipment in a ruling on Friday. The judge entered a judgment of more than $24 billion that Missouri officials vowed to enforce by seizing Chinese assets. Well, China didn't cover up COVID. We'll come to that in a minute. And China didn't contest this case because Missouri courts have no jurisdiction whatsoever over China. Now the state's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, said, and believe it or not, I'm quoting Falun Gong's new Tang Dynasty TV here, that he's eyeing any China-owned assets, not just the ones on Missouri's soil. And according to Tang Dynasty TV, some experts raise concerns that Bailey's plan could face legal challenges. Could face legal challenges? Ha! That's the understatement of the century. This is going to be very interesting. According to the Missouri's own trade information, this is going to cost Missouri a lot more than it will ever cost China. China's trade globally is $3.4 trillion. China's trade with Missouri is less than $2 billion. Missouri's trade with China creates 25,000 jobs, and there are over 6,500 Chinese students in the state. $2 billion in losses to China? That's something it'll take about 23 seconds to recover from. That's sarcasm. I've never done the maths on this, but it is a drip in the ocean. Whereas the loss of 6,500 students, 25,000 jobs, and almost $2 billion a year would be just unsupportable to a state with a population of only 6.7 million, about the same as a small city in China. It's laughable. This is an ant attempting to stomp on an elephant. Notwithstanding all of this, Judge Limbaugh of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Missouri imposed the judgment against China, its governing Communist Party, local governments in China, as well as a health agency and a laboratory in the country. Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey said in a statement that the ruling held China accountable for its actions, meaning there are no penalties against Chinese businesses, Chinese individuals, or even Chinese institutions in Missouri. If the Attorney General wants to touch any of those, he will incur the full wrath of the U.S. legal system and the incredible amounts of both funding, support, and influence that China can bring to bear on the USA. It's just not going to happen. The reports all state pretty much the same thing. They all come from pretty much the same source, and they share a common theme that, and I quote, China refused to show up to the court, but that doesn't mean they get away with causing untold suffering and economic devastation. End of quote. That's their reporting. Let's go back to the start of COVID. There was no doubt a new virus going around the globe. There was no doubt that it was discovered in Wuhan. And there is no doubt that the Wuhan, the city, has an institute called the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's no doubt that coronaviruses were being worked on there. These matters are indisputed. Everything else after that is either conjecture, speculation, misinformation, misunderstanding, total ignorance, or outright lies. I'm not expert enough in the field to know what is or isn't a lie, but I have a good friend, Anna Chun, who has been covering this from the very beginning. She's been on my channel and we've discussed this before. But more importantly, she's created a timeline of events which I've linked. This is beyond any argument or discussion, going back all the way to 2017 when Obama was still president, and itemizing line by line what we usually don't remember. For example, Trump tweeting about covfefe in 2017 and bragging it might be something with a deeper meaning. Did Trump know something we didn't? When the Fort Detrick lab was closed due to leaks, did the US Department of Defense, which was running it, know something we didn't? When people started dying of a mysterious vaping illness, did the CDC know something we didn't? When Trump closed the Predict early warning system, did he expect nothing, or was he expecting something we didn't know about? And when he closed the China branch of the CDC, was he aware of something we weren't aware of? All of these are conjecture, not really designed to be debated, but definitely things to be considered, and all of them faithfully logged and recorded by Anna, a British journalist with integrity, something we don't see very often. Anna delves right back in time, well before COVID, with her investigative skills, but since the start of the pandemic, usually assumed to be around December 2019, when China realized it was dealing with a potential pandemic, Anna has recorded every action China took, what China did to inform, first of all, itself, the World Health Organization, and the US CDC, which was as early as the 1st of January 2020. China was transparent. It acted lawfully and legitimately. Of course, it acted in its own best interests, but also in the interests of the entire world, acting globally. China wasn't involved in a single case of pirating equipment away from smaller countries because they felt their need was greater. This is something only the USA actually did. I've linked that too. It closed flights down China. Entry into China became a matter of quarantine, and I know this because I was subject to it as one of the very first people to enter it in March 2020. All the while, Trump was on TV every day telling the world it wasn't serious, you don't need to wear masks. He wouldn't wear one, and he wouldn't be closing any trade, any tourism, or anything at all, until Americans started to die. And then he suddenly turned on China. His acolytes followed him and ignored all the steps China had taken. And this is what Missouri has done. Followed blindly what was reported in anti-China media, speculated on how they could have done better if they'd had more information, and blamed China for why they didn't. No one needs more lawsuits. They only enrich lawyers. But if they have to be fought, then they have to be fought. The moment Missouri's Attorney General attempts to seize the assets of any Chinese business or individual in Missouri, he will experience the fighting spirit of the Chinese. It will almost certainly cost his state millions. It will likely cost him his job at the next election, and it will expose him and his legal system for what they really are: ignorant bullies with no thought of the system of law, the rule of law, only a rules-based order to suit American greed. And that's all I have to say on COVID and the pandemic and the Missouri law case. See you next time, and I hope you can like, share, and subscribe to this one. Bye for now.